Welcome to the Finance Geeks, a podcast about real financial planning. Join us as we get into the nitty-gritty, discussing everything from pensions to portfolios. If you're into numbers, strategies, and running a successful practice, this is your ultimate geeky hangout.
Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of the Finance Geeks podcast. Thanks for joining us. My name is Warren Shute and I'm joined by
Paul Cleworth.
Today we're talking about the fallout from the budget and what we're doing in our firms. So Paul, before we dive into the budget, what have you been up to?
It's been a couple of weeks since our last podcast, and I've done a few things. I've been to Rome, which was all very nice with the family over half term. So we did all the usual sites, you know, the Colosseum and the Pantheon and the Trevi Fountain and the Spanish Steps. But we didn't get to go into the St. Peter's Basilica because the queue. I've been in there before about 15 years ago with my wife, but the queues were 2.5 hours, and our children had enough by then.
I bet they were really sad.
We did a lot of walking. Yeah. Well, we had lots of ice cream and pizza, and that was fun.
Good.
And then at the weekend, just gone. In fact, what are we? Friday. So last weekend, we had the London Cup, which is a big karting meet for my 13-year-old Miles. And he came 12th out of 23, so in final B. But it's all rather terrifying, and it's live streamed actually on YouTube, so you can watch it. And it's got a commentator, and it's quite a show.
I bet you find it hard to keep track of him spinning around the racetrack. I bet it's hard to see him when he's going around all the place.
Well, I've got binoculars. And I'm probably the only parent there who's got binoculars, and it's brilliant watching them because my eyesight's not as good as it was, hence me wearing my glasses here. But from a distance, and it's dark at some points in the evenings, it's going dark now. It is great fun watching them on the binoculars. But you could see it live streamed on your phone if you wanted to. I was there on the sidelines watching him, you know, karting around the track and hoping that he wouldn't, you know, crash out or spin out. So he did really well. It was on his second major race. Just another thing before I hand over to you is we've had quite a few things happen in the world. You know, the US election with Trump winning is all been happening, of course. And I will talk a bit about that in a minute, I'm sure. Yesterday, you and I met in London to go to the Humans Under Management Conference, which is all about human behaviour. And I thought that was excellent. And I believe there was also a budget on the 30th of October.
Was there? Seems so long ago now. Budget. That budget hijacked my holiday, my half term. It's It was. I don't know about.
What did you get up to then over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I literally just had 2 weeks off. Although officially I was off, I wasn't actually off. I had 2 weeks off in the diary and no client meetings and things. But the budget was like tax year end for us in our office. It was really like, you know, So I had about a week and a half off. I did do a bit of work in between, which was a bit of a downer.
Go anywhere?
No, didn't go away. Just took some time off. Our house was on the market with moving, so my wife enlisted me in a bit of DIY duties and stuff like clearing stuff up and taking stuff down to the tip and cutting.
Sorry about that.
And, yeah, absolutely. What a pain that was, but it's done now anyway. And bit of golf. Got out, played a bit of golf, which was nice. Caught up with some friends, had a bit of good time, so that was lovely. And had some good weather actually. So
friends, when did this happen?
I went to the rugby. I went to the rugby actually with a bunch of my dad's American, cousin in the States said, hey, my best friend from high school's over at the base near you. Be nice if you guys hooked up. So, of course, very welcoming. Invited him over for a Sunday roast. Had a chat to him and stuff. And I said, well, have you been to a rugby game yet? He's not been. So we arranged a rugby game. I got a message said, can some of my pilot mates come? So I end up going to Bath Rugby with like 6 American Air Force pilots. Had a blast. Had a great time. Yeah, I went to Bath Rugby. And
had a few drinks.
I had a couple of Guinnesses. It'd be rude not to. Actually, took him to the Brewdog Bar in Bath, which was Brewdog Bar in Bath, which was really good fun. But
my wife went to university in Bath. It's lovely there, isn't it?
Really nice. Yeah, very very picturesque. Very picturesque. So Hum. Thought it was fantastic. Had a great time. Lovely catching up with you. And we probably should share our photo booth photos. So I thought that was a bit of fun. And had a good time there. If you're a listener, you've not been to Hum yet, highly recommend it. It's definitely worth going. And you've got it to hand. Mine's in my other office, so it was great. So if you're listening to this on a podcast,
with Andy.
If you listen to this on a podcast, Paul's holding up the photos from Hum, so you have to go and listen, watch it on YouTube as well. But hey, like you said, we had the budget of all budgets.
So obviously we're going to get onto the budget in a second, but I want to just talk about what's happened with Trump winning the presidency. I mean, since he's won on the 5th, and he sort of announced it before he'd finalised the electoral college votes, but the finalised figures have come in now. He was 295 against Kamala Harris's 226, so it was a whitewash really in the end. And they've won the Senate 53-45 on Wednesday, and it looks like they might win the House of Representatives as well because they are 211 to 199, and there's 25 to be declared apparently. But you see, what's also happened, as I'm sure you know, is the Federal Reserve have cut interest rates by 0.5% as well, and it's meant that markets have rallied. Stock markets have just gone through the roof, and Trump almost certainly will take credit for it, even though it's nothing really to do with it. Albeit it might be because now we've got a bit of, certainty, and they know what happens. And Republicans, the party of sort of low taxation, so completely the opposite then to the UK.
Yeah, I said that to my wife. It's like, we've come out of this pandemic period, and the UK have said, we need more support, we need more taxes, pay everything back and pay everything down. And the capitalist Americans have said, no, we need to reduce taxes, we need to boost the economy and go completely the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
It's and I do think you're right. I think the market rally is a sign of, okay, Trump's going to be cutting taxes. He's going to be very pro-business. Let's see these equity prices.
But he's also pro-growth.
Yeah,
I think he's pro-growth, and as much as you might despise him as a human, and I think a lot of people do, given the what his character's like, the reality is he appealed to the average voter, if you like, and to what the Americans wanted. The language, you see, incredible marketeer. I got to give him for that. The language that he uses and the way he appeals to Middle America, if you like. What do you think? You're half American.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think you have to judge him as a president, but not as a person. I listened to some of the Joe Rogan podcast with his interview. I couldn't get through it. It wasn't my cup of tea. But that doesn't stop me thinking he's going to be great for America and build the economy over there.
Do you know the Federal Reserve reduced interest rates, or the Fed, from 5 to 4.75, and then recently to 4.5. And this is, it's this to make sure that it sort of fends off any economic decline and sort of make sure that But the opposite now is going to occur. There's inflationary fears, and markets have rallied more. And I don't know. I'm sort of a bit cautious about what's happening. You think, how long will it last? How long will markets continue to go up? And will there be a correction? I'm just cautiously optimistic, on what's happening. I don't want to ruin a good thing or be negative, be a neg bag about it. But actually, you've got to be cautious.
So they were down last year. They were up. Sorry, they were up last year. They're up this year. I reckon another year they might have a little pullback. It's history repeats itself. It's like
everything reverts to the mean, is what Jack Bogle used to say.
Yeah, but the mean increases as well. That's one thing people have got to remember. As prices go up, the average price is going up. So I'm optimistic. I'm quite bullish over the next sort of 4 years, really. So the UK, on the other hand, that's a different matter.
I know. Let's talk about that. The UK budget, the aftermath. So where should we start?
Should we start with national minimum wage and employer national insurance, that kind of thing?
So yeah, absolutely. But before we go into some of the sort of the impact and the specifics of what's happened with taxes, I think it's important to just at least say some of the facts. The facts are, that the budget was there to raise taxes, no question. Rachel Reeves said she wants to raise 40 billion in tax raises, and we now know that it's the highest tax raise budget since 1993. And she sort of changed the fiscal rules to suit her purposes. It's all about borrowing money and raising taxation to try and stimulate the economy, to pay doctors and train drivers. I mean, where's this black hole come from? It just seems to me to be going to get bigger.
And she's done a 50-50, hasn't she? Raised roughly half in borrowing, roughly half in taxes. So
roughly.
Yeah, I don't think we should get into the politics of it because everyone's going to have their own opinion on it, and we could alienate a lot of listeners. But yeah, you're right.
No, I agree with that. But she did say on the 4th of June on Sky News, I think it was an article, the link for it's in the show notes. She said, we don't need higher taxes. What we need is growth. And I don't want to, and I have no plans to increase any taxes beyond those which are have already set out. And then,
Is that
and then a couple of months
right?
later, she's a complete reversal of policy. I mean, did she not know at that time? Did she not open the book, the budget, and say, "Oh yeah, I can see there's a black hole there. There's money we need to raise." And it's just so someone has had a chat with her, or she's looked at it, and she's an economist by trade, or she studied it at least at university. To first say we're not going, you don't need to raise them, and then it's like, right, this is the mother of all tax raising. I just wonder whether it will actually raise taxes, because the Laffer curve suggests, which is an economic concept, that there's an optimal point at which you can grow the economy and generate an actual increase in the tax take through raised taxes. And I think we're pushing through that now, and that the tax take itself from HMRC might well be falling in due course, because people will look for ways to save tax. They'll move abroad. They'll try and mitigate it every which way they can. And some people will lay off staff because of these increases we're going to talk about in national insurance.
Yeah, I certainly think it will stifle growth. As far as the detail behind it, that's way above my pay grade. I don't even confess to have an idea of how much impact it will have. But I do.
Well, we'll only know in hindsight, won't we? We'll know in hindsight.
Yeah.
So let's get into what's actually occurred and talk through some of the main, let's say the top 5 or 6 changes that will affect our clients and our business. So do you want to start with one of the main ones?
Well, I think one of the main ones is the increase of the national minimum wage and the wage for apprentices and stuff like that. There's a big hike there that's going to have a big impact on employers who have younger workforce. If they have a younger workforce or a lower paid workforce, that's going to be a disproportionate higher increase in their salaries. And my belief is that will then have a knock-on effect on pay increases going forward over the next couple of years.
Oh, undoubtedly, and I think that you're right. It's certain businesses will feel the brunt of these key changes. The national minimum wage, as you say, will have an impact on the total tax take and employment and wage inflation moving forwards, because you can't necessarily demand that everybody gets a pay rise, But I like the idea of it. It's just whether in practice whether it's going to work to say the minimum has to be this amount by law.
Yeah,
so
I agree with that.
We'll see.
No, definitely.
We'll see.
And then the increase in national insurance for the employer was very cleverly done, because I think all of us, not all of us, but so many of us expected a 2% rise. And then she came out of the 1.2% rise, and we kind of feel almost like appreciative. Oh, it wasn't 2%, but still it was 1.2% increase, which is huge. If that wasn't enough, then reducing the level in which we start paying it was significant.
I didn't see that coming.
No.
Yeah, the secondary earnings threshold. So class 1A and I is 13.8 to 15%, and the secondary earnings threshold falling from 9,100 to 5,000. I think this will only affect certain size businesses, because although I have a wage role like yourself, and I was looking at how this would impact myself, and initially calculated it as like an extra £4,500 of NI, because most of the income that myself and my wife take are dividends. But at the same time, the employment allowance is going from 5,000 to 10,500. So that it's not actually going to affect us dramatically. The 25% corporate tax is here to stay. So we are paying more corporation tax this year than the previous years, for sure. But I heard from some businesses are going to, not only with hundreds of staff, for example, likely to have to reduce wage inflation, lay off staff, close stores, because this impact is going to be massive. I mean, hundreds of thousands of pounds that big businesses are going to pay. And apparently it's going to raise 25 billion, towards this 40 billion NI in itself. And she said, didn't she, that we weren't going to raise the 3 main forms of tax: income tax, national insurance, and VAT. But then it sort of subtly changed that, but it's not for workers, it's for employers, for businesses. You just have to pay the brunt of it, which is, it's a misconception that business owners somehow, I don't know, get off scot-free or pay less tax. That's not the case at all.
But I think as a listener, as a planner, it's very important that you are making sure that your clients are claiming the employment allowance and that they are planning their remuneration in the most tax efficient, legal way possible. Something that, and I'm not going to be able to quote the figures, you probably can, but something that we've started doing recently, and it's off tangent a little bit, is about the corporation tax bands. We never paid so much attention to the marginal rate. And it's only in the last year, really, that we've paid more attention to the marginal rate, getting clients out of that marginal rate if they're a smaller sized firm.
Yeah, so on the first 50 grand, 19%, the next 200,000 on 26.5%, and then it's 25% over that. And it's a really odd equation. You think, well, how does it go from 19 to 26.5? And it's mathematically, effectively, everyone pays this, it's a graduated tax, but you get to the point where most big businesses with high profits of over 250 grand, that you'll pay 25%. You can do lots of things, as you know, and we speak to business owners and have them increase their pension contributions. Sometimes it's worth increasing their salaries, altering the remuneration structure, looking for expenses that you can legally put through the business, whether it's cars, electric cars, or whatever it is. And with my team, what I've been doing over the last couple of years is altering the pay structures so that we slightly reduce salaries and increase pensions, and agreed with the staff, but do it through salary exchange, also called salary sacrifice. And you can do it in a way that everyone's better off. So it's just, it's totally worth doing. And instead of the employee paying their pension out of their net income as a net payment and going into a pension, and then them having to do tax returns, it's just way better to do it via salary exchange.
Yeah. But I think, for planners listening, this is a great opportunity for you to revisit your clients, especially their business owners, and making sure that they're being remunerated as tax efficient as possible, and arguably build relationships with accountants too, and start referring work back to accountants.
Well, not all advisors know about business tax planning, because you can't just assume that every financial planner knows about how to run a limited company or the best ways to remunerate yourself or tax relief for certain things. And it's it's if you're not sure of the answer, do ask. There's a lot of help out there. There's forums. There's if you're an advisor, you want to learn about these things, you can ask another advisor who specialises in it. And I think there's a misconception as well that people's accountants do more than they think. Some are incredibly good and proactive and help their clients work proactively and talk to them before the end of the year and say, no, we could do this, we could change this, we could increase this, let's make use of your allowances and top up your pensions and so forth. But I've seen a lot of cases with clients that I've met, spoke to their accountants. The accountant's very reactive and is calculating the tax after the tax year. There's nothing you can really do to go back and say, oh, I wish we'd changed that. So it's important to work it out in advance and guesstimate as best you can your tax and save accordingly for it, whether it's VAT or corp tax in your business or whether it's your personal tax on your dividend income.
And I've spoken to a few, I don't want to exaggerate, but I've spoken to a few people who haven't claimed the employment allowance, which really shocks me, because apparently it's very easy to claim. It's just a tick box on Xero or Sage or something.
Okay, so the other big one, CGT. Let's talk about capital gains tax.
Great, capital gains tax.
What's happened, and so you tell us what's happened, and also what you're doing about it.
Okay, so capital gains tax rates have increased. We all expect, but I expected them to align with income tax. That's what our communication to our clients were before the budget. So going from 10 and 20 to 20 and 40. What actually happens, they went from 10 to 18 and 20 to 24. So aligning with what retail residential property rates were pre-budget.
Yeah. And that's classic political manoeuvring, isn't it? To say prior to the budget, it's going to be bad and leak it and the press gets hold of it and somebody either makes it up or whatever. We might do it at marginal rates and then it comes out lower. It's still higher, than it was. And I think it's reasonably fair if there is a thing, because it's still cheaper than income tax rates. So it doesn't dissuade us from investing in general investment accounts. Once you've filled your ISA and you've topped up your pension, it's the next pot usually is your general investment account, which is, brokerage account, as you know, and just unlimited as to how much you can put in there. Have you ever had clients actually put money in that they've already paid tax on and then not realise that they have to pay further tax on the income that's generated and on realised gains?
No. No, I'm sure.
Why do I have to pay tax?
But put it this way, they don't tell me that anyway. But I'm sure they maybe got quite surprised. But I guess, from our perspective, it has made us revisit whether we've always asset allocated, but also tax wrap allocated too. So if we got a big investment, we'd use a GIA and offshore bond. I'm wondering now whether we bring those limits down. If there is a small amount, should we start using offshore bonds, that kind of thing? It's a tricky one.
I was going to say when the CGT allowance was 12,300, and the rates were 10 and 20, basic rate and high rate and additional rate, all paid at 20. You could have £500,000 in a general investment account and not really would be concerned about taxation if the client's specifically drawing income, because you get maybe 1.5% to 2% income generated from the dividends and the bond income, the interest on cash and the bond interest. And, let's say that's £10,000 on 500,000. You have your dividend allowance, you have your personal savings allowance, and you're paying at your marginal rate. And it wasn't that much. The tax wasn't that much on that amount. And then if the client's drawing 4% a year, 20,000 out, because they could use 12,300 before there was any CGT, it was great. Now CGT allowance is £3,000, and the rates of CGT have gone up. So I think it's probably 200k, and after that you might be considering on or offshore bonds.
No, I don't disagree.
Depends on what
completely agree. We probably would favour offshore bond, but that's just us as a firm. But one thing that we have decided today or yesterday is to formalise our capital gains tax process. We don't have a capital gains tax policy in our firm so private banks would offer, or wealth managers would often realise about 1% of the portfolio or 2% of the portfolio annually anyway, just to realise so the capital gains don't get too bad. We're going to formalise our approach. We haven't done it yet. It's something we're going to work on. We'll bound it around the office and come up with some sort of solution and then reflect on it and then put it into policy. We have a structure, because at the moment we were basically doing a lot of capital gains tax planning pre-budget to realise gains, and it was on a case-by-case basis, typically realising gains at basic rate, virtually always utilising the capital gains tax allowance just in case it was removed, but then for some people realising some at higher rate as well.
Definitely. I think you're right, it's always case-by-case, and I did half a dozen clients prior to the budget. I specifically contacted them and said, look, the cash is running a bit low in your portfolio, a bit concerned about future market volatility, but also, that's not always going to happen. So the main thing was, can we and should we realise some of your assets before the budget? And it was a tactical play. And we did some pretty high numbers for certain clients, more than £500,000 with some clients, and realised their GIA, sold it down to cash. They will incur again, but we're not going to wait to within the 30 days buy the assets back, partly because the assets have gone back up in value, but also because now they can just incur the gain at their marginal rate pre-budget, which is 10 or 20, as opposed to the slightly higher rates. And it's not dramatically higher, as you know, from 20 to 24 for higher rates. It's not dramatically higher, but it's still a saving. And what I think it's easy to forget is that if you just hadn't done it, and you just let it grow and grow and grow, you're just kicking the can down the road. You're just when you need to access that money, you're just going to pay an even bigger capital gains tax. So there's no CGT on cash. And so it's not a bad thing holding, a certain amount of cash for your needs, for your income and capital needs in your portfolio. It's not, 5%, 10% sometimes, dependent on their circumstances. So those plays, which I don't like to do, to try and tactically, make decisions pre-budget, a lot of those paid off. But we did have a lot of clients take tax-free cash from pensions, and that's not happened at all. There's been no change to tax-free cash rules, has there?
Yeah, no change at all. No change on that. We sent a communication out. I was actually at the CISI conference because there was lots of talk about it, and it was getting in the press and the rumours and things. And I just sent a communication out with a LBC radio clip, Keir Starmer confirming he wasn't doing it, and then a print from the FT where I think Rachel Reeves had commented, says she wasn't going to do it. I just emailed some clients say, look, don't do it. Stay as you are. They've said they're not going to touch it. Yeah. We just got to trust it. And unless the client was sort of like maybe within 12 months of retirement and needed to access it, then we stood our ground. And luckily we didn't have anyone take their tax-free cash. But she said she wasn't going to do other things. She could have quite easily gone against that. So I think we were
Yeah.
fortunate more than anything else.
In our previous podcast, we talked about the sort of probability of these things happening, and I think we both thought that the idea of changing to tax-free cash immediately was going to be a bit remote. But the CGT changes literally happened on the 30th. There's no wait period or anything like that, and I think they had to be, didn't they? You can't just say, "Oh, we'll bring it in April 2025," and then there'll be loads of people going, "Right, we need to sell our assets now." Prior to these changes.
I don't know, and a listener might know. You probably do know. When did they come in? Was it midnight on the 30th, or was it like first thing in the morning on the 30th? She wasn't retrospective, surely.
Not retrospective, but it's any assets realised after the 30th. So from the 31st.
Okay, so if we realise on the 30th, you're okay.
The new rates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there'll be this weird calculation where assets realised before will be at the old rates and after will be at the new rates. And a lot of the time, CGT, you have to work it out yourself, or you could get your advisor for sure. I know a lot of my clients that we just give them the realised gain calculation, and it's just not as easy as you think. It's not. It's more complicated than clients perhaps realise and advisors realise. So on the Transact platform, you can literally go and get a realised gains calculation. And make sure that you use the calculator to do it, because there's no CGT on cash. So if you just say, "Oh, I've put 500 grand in that portfolio, it's now 600. I've sold the whole thing. The gain is 100." It's not, and it depends very specifically on what you bought the units for, what you sold them for, and so forth. So, so CGT perhaps no massive change, but it's arguably fair.
Yeah, we could argue that one. I guess the extension for that is the business asset disposal relief. What was entrepreneurs relief?
Yeah.
I think that was a bit of a kicker. Okay, so
do you know what the rates have increased from and to?
So what have we got? 10% going up to 14, and then going up to 18 the following year.
Yeah, that's right. So it's in April 25 up to 14, then up to 18. And I'm not sure that this in any way, I mean, this is a rhetorical question, but encourages entrepreneurialism and business growth.
I agree.
People still into use. Is that even a word? They use BADR with entrepreneurs relief, and they sort of interchange.
Yeah,
that's
interchange.
But the reality is, there's perhaps going to be less people want to utilize this allowance and sell their businesses. Because that's quite a big jump from 10% to 18%. So,
jump. Yeah,
is what it is.
If we also remember where it's come from, 10 million, and now we're at 1 million. So it's really been sort of hammered.
I know. So, imagine selling your business pre the change, and it was 10 million you got for your business, and you got it all out at 10% tax. I mean, you're literally laughing all the way to the bank. Anyway. I'm wondering if there's any good news in this budget, because, to be honest, we've said everything's rising, and these are only some of the rises. Do you know the budget is 164 pages, and you have to get to page 127 of the budget before you see the tax changes. And we sent out a link to a guide to our clients, and it was, I look at it now and I think, it's a bit dry, because it's very factual. The link for it's in the show notes. People can download our guide and the full budget. I've put them both in there. But everything's gone up. CGT's gone up. NI's gone up. We've got BADR going up. We've got VAT on school fees going up from the 1st of January. They talked about that previously. And then, of course, the rise in stamp duty for second-time buyers from 3% to 5%, which is, I don't think that's a terrible thing, because, you've got only so much housing out there. And if all the wealthy people are buying up all the houses, how much it's going to dissuade them, an extra 2%, I don't know. If you want that house, you'll buy it probably. But they'll raise more money from it.
Yeah, it's second property 5%. That's a lot. Yeah, I think so.
If it's a property in Cornwall, or a nice big place, it'll be bloody expensive.
Very expensive.
The biggest change in the budget, is this tax changes on pension death benefits. So bringing pensions inside the estate for each.
I think we should say potential tax changes still, right? So we've got this consultation period. We've got this consultation going. I think it's going through till January 21st. Where 22nd is okay. Let's not argue over a day. Where we're going to go back and forth. We're going to go back and forth, and we're going to try and get some kind of information and try and come to some kind of conclusion. And hopefully, there'll be some more rational behaviour where she makes it a little bit more favourable. Because I think it's really, really quite punitive, particularly dying over 75.
Yeah, there's been some crazy calculations where you could be pay up to 89%, and the
Yeah.
calculation is based on, it's probably a little bit unrealistic, this, because you'd have to have an estate bigger than 2.35 million where you lose your nil rate band, or 2.7 million for couples. So a big estate, you then have lost your nil rate band. You've also paid 40% inheritance tax, and when the person receives the money, if they've died over 75, the recipient's paid 40% nationally, or 45% potentially income tax on the full amount. And it's very unlikely to get to that level, because when I talked to Kevin about this earlier today, and I was asking myself, is it fair to bring pensions into the estate? And as you'll remember, we had big changes in 2015 with pension freedoms, and there's been lots of changes to the death benefits. It used to be 55% tax on death benefits after age 75, or from any crystallized benefits as it was back then. Then they changed the rules pre and post 75, where pre 75 it's tax free. After 75, the person pays tax at their marginal rate. And I've actually concluded now that it's not that punitive, because it doesn't affect couples, married couples, as in one dies, the surviving spouse still receives the money with no IHT. But I think that it is punitive if it's a big estate, and if it's a massive pension. Do we feel sorry for everyone with massive £1 million pensions? And they now have got 40% tax on the entire estate, including the pension. But you could have all this happen, and then the recipient says, well, I'm not going to pay the 40% tax. I'm not going to pay my marginal rate of tax on this as well, because I'll leave it in a pension wrapper. I'll draw down on it, which they could do.
I think it's a scandalous. I'm sorry.
You think it's what?
It's scandalous. It's like, just dipping their hand in, taking your money. This is hard-earned money. People work really hard, put the money away. Most people who've got big pensions...
You do get tax relief going in.
Yeah, but they haven't inherited this money. They've earned this money, and they've put it away for their retirement. And arguably, they want to preserve it for their children, so their children can do other things. And they're going to dip their hands in it. And, anyway, that's a political answer. But I think
I've definitely got some clients that have intentionally over the years not touched their pensions, knowing that they'll probably go to their children and their grandchildren, whoever the beneficiaries are, free from inheritance tax.
100%.
And that's what she's doing. She's removing that decision to purposely mitigate inheritance tax. And so, there's lots of things that people can do to mitigate inheritance tax, one of which is to take out decent life insurance policy or a whole of life policy. Secondly, is to spend more of their money. And I think that encouraging, and the impact for us is definitely going to be that clients of ours are going to want to draw their tax-free cash if they haven't done already, maybe spend it or give it away. And then maybe they'll start spending and drawing down on their pension that they otherwise weren't going to spend, pay income tax, which is good for the government, and it deplete the value of it, so that it depletes the value of the estate.
I don't like anyone dictating to me or my clients on our behaviors and what we have to do or should do, and making decisions based on tax. So I agree with you. What you've just said is, if that's going to happen, I don't think I'm going to make any changes or make any recommendations to my clients until we know with certainty what's going to happen. Otherwise, we could be in the situation of the tax-free cash, people taking it and it doesn't happen. Or you quite rightly said before we went on air about the British ISA,
that didn't come in.
So it might not come in, something might happen, but I've been thinking through the types of advice and what sort of things I could do to try and mitigate the whole situation. A couple of things I was sort of thinking is maybe take tax-free cash and then gift it away into trust, whether that's a discounted gift trust or just a discretionary trust, to try and get it out of the estate, and then drawing the income from the pension and then gifting that into a trust, gift out a regular income. Now, you're not going to get the full amount across because you're going to pay income tax on the money and things like that. But I'm just trying. I haven't yet done the calculations of where's it going to come best and what's the best sort of solution. But that's my kind of thinking at the moment. And
that's really sensible thinking.
Yeah, and what might be good for listeners if we carry this. Carry this on. So once the consultation period's over, we then do another update. And there's lots of stuff going on LinkedIn about what's happening. But what I try not to do is focus on all the problems, because it probably gets me annoyed. That's probably why. But trying to say, okay, what's the solution? How can we add better value to our clients? And that's where I am at the moment. My decision is to make no changes yet, because we don't know what it's going to look like. But if it came in yesterday, I think I'd be saying to clients, okay, look, let's take tax-free cash. Let's gift that into this trust. Let's start taking income. You don't need it, so let's gift it into another trust out of regular income, and then try and sort of move as much money out of the estate as possible.
Well, if it was out of regular income, if they'd paid tax on it, it could be a gift out of normal expenditure, which is if it's argued that it's less, if it doesn't affect their standard of living and it's a regular form of income, specifically from a taxable form of income like pension, then it can be out of the estate on day one. So I like that. I think that you've got to, it's a bigger topic than people perhaps realize, IHT. It's very specialist. There are lots of things you can do. And I think there's advice that some people get that perhaps is inaccurate or is, as you say, it's benefiting the investor or the company, for example. Now, what I'm talking about is there are firms out there that specialize in EIS or AIM-listed investments, rather, using business property relief, and there's going to be an overhaul of that domain now. You know, I like the simple things of whole of life policies, spending your money, making use of your annual allowance, gifts out of income, and potentially exempt transfers, and saying, you know, I like yourself, I like to encourage my clients, if they don't need the money, to make gifts during their lifetime and get that 7-year clock running, rather than just put it all into trust now and say to them, you can have it on my death when I'm 90. In which case the client, their child might be in their 50s or 60s, you know. It's going to be interesting with this consultation, but those were the words of the voice of reason, the words of wisdom from yourself there. I totally agree thinking about it. Wait till the 22nd of Jan, see what happens. You know, we can all live until, you know, wait a couple of months till then.
I do think we will be waiting a bit longer than 22nd of Jan. That's when the consultation period ends. They'll then go through all their paperwork and that sort of stuff. So we're probably you know, into April time before we hear anything. But, you know, give him credit. Keith actually raised to me yesterday about the potentially death in service benefits as well, falling part of this. So it's a registered group life scheme that also could be subject to the IHT payment as well, rather than an accepted scheme. Yeah. So there'll be
definitely.
Lots of work for us to do.
You know, it's a good thing. You can definitely add a lot of value to your clients, because, you know, what I think this budget has brought in is probably quite a lot of confusion, especially over pensions and you know, some of the rules not being clear. And just to sort of say, we're going to bring in pensions inside of the estate from April 2027 doesn't mean it's definitively going to happen. The CGT changes will happen. They have happened. They're starting on the 31st of October. So you've just got to, as I say, not take knee-jerk reactions and take a bit of time to process what's happening. And it's the same with all budgets. Everybody tries to provide the guide within 24 hours of it coming out. This is what's happening at the updates. And it's just they push it out. And that's great. These are the facts. But in terms of what to do, you do have to digest it. It's case by case. And then you have to think about, right, let's discuss the options and help you make a good decision, which is where a good financial planner comes in.
And I think you've raised a good point there. I think one of the important things as a financial planner, you really need to be making sure you're communicating to your client. So making sure, even if if you don't have the time or the expertise or the knowledge to write something yourself and you're unable to buy it in, why don't you just point them in the direction so they can get some trusted resources? So they'll be getting their information from somewhere, and really you should be trying to guide them to trusted, reliable sources to get that information, and in the most timely way possible as well. We sent our bullets out literally minutes after she sat down, just so our clients had something to sort of look at. And we're now just formulating. It will go out probably tonight, if not tomorrow, a summary of where we are at the moment with the budget, and what we know and what we don't know, because the client's going to have questions in their mind. We want to make, I know they've got questions about their pensions already. So, yeah.
Well, I've definitely encouraged clients to get in touch with me, and now it's a bit overwhelming because there's a lot of clients getting in touch and understandably want to have responses and answers. So I'm sort of, they're backing up a bit, but I'm going to get through them all. So overall, before we go to sort of some quotes or anecdotes, your thoughts on the budget in terms of lasting thoughts in terms of what you thought about it, and what it's going to do for the economy and the country.
I don't think it's going to be positive for the economy and country. I don't think it's going to help it grow. And I worry that it might actually stifle the growth. And if she doesn't get it right, the amount of borrowing she's pledging, it could even spike interest rates. So yeah, I'm not hugely positive about it. But then in the same breath, I don't think that's going to stop the stock markets making profits and clients doing good planning and us adding value to our clients. So, but hey, who knows? Who knows? Too many moving parts.
I thought it was very underwhelming, for UK prosperity and economic growth. And, it's not particularly good news at all for business owners who are going to bear the brunt of these tax increases through the NI increases, or to, I can sort of live with asset owners with large portfolios paying a bit more capital gains tax, and people with lots of homes selling them and paying CGT. I do think the pension rules was a bit, is a bit onerous, overly onerous, and they should. I'm hoping the consultation comes up with something decent from that. But I would absolutely urge all those that are listening to take some advice, take some time to process, and look at the options with regards to mitigating taxes fairly. But I want to touch on one of the things you said then, about the impact on the economy. Milton Friedman was an economist. He's passed away now, but he argued that government spending, whether it's financed by taxes or borrowing, it ultimately represents a form of taxation on the economy. And in his view, borrowed funds leads to future taxes due to the eventual need to repay debt, and with interest on top. So all the government borrowing all the money, they're not just taxing us more money directly, but they're borrowing more. And that's going to lead to future tax raises. And what the government needs to be doing, like the Americans are almost doing, is stimulating economic growth by ideally reducing taxes or looking at ways to grow the economy and inspire people. And I thought it was a very non-inspiring budget. It was it left me thinking, wow, I think we're going to go into recession, which is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth sometime in the next year. So
I thought it was almost a spiteful budget on wealthy individuals. It could have been worse, but people going into private schools, people with larger pension funds, that kind of thing. But it's Labour government. But hey, I got a fact for you. Rachel Reeves stood up for about an hour at the budget. The longest budget speech in British history was delivered by William Gladstone on the 18th of April, 1853, my birthday, not in 1853. And he spoke for over 4 hours while presenting the budget. Can you imagine that? And
I believe he had a sherry at the same time.
Yeah, it's the only time alcohol is allowed to be consumed, and it's by the Chancellor on Budget Day, by all accounts. And just to sort of carry on from that, you may not know, but a long-lost uncle of mine, William Shute, was the Chancellor of the Exchequer back in 1761. No, seriously.
Your family goes back that far, your family tree?
Yeah. His name was William Barrington Shute, and his speech was 3 hours and 45 minutes. So he gave William Gladstone a run for his money.
Wow, that's fascinating. I don't know whether I feel now that I'm impressed, or I want to blame you and your family for higher tax rises over the years. I don't know. Yeah, I'm quite annoyed. Don't think we're going to talk about taxes anymore. Have you got any interesting quotes? Because I've got 2 quotes to sort of finish up before we sign off.
Go on, you do.
So I got 2. One's from is this: you cannot tax your way to prosperity, which is what Winston Churchill says. And when I heard that, I thought, that's exactly what's happening. We're going the other way. You can't just keep taxing people. They get annoyed. They move abroad. All the wealthy people will be like, right, I'm not going to pay tax now. I'll find legitimate ways to mitigate it. The second one I've got for you is by Milton Friedman. And he said, many people want the government to protect the consumer. A much more urgent problem is to protect the consumer from the government.
Yeah, well, that's exactly
he
what
was
we
a
do,
believer
right?
in free markets. Yeah, less regulation, less bureaucracy, less red tape, more capitalism and growth. I mean, did you see in the States, even Elon Musk was promoting Donald Trump because he wanted less regulation, less bureaucracy, and he wants to get his rockets to Mars. He says a democratic government wouldn't have got that.
Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. There are some links in the show notes, by the way, so I've included those. So do have a look at those, and let's do another update on the budget in Jan-Feb. Maybe it's the February one once we know more.
Great. Okay, well, look, everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Finance Geeks. Remember to like, subscribe, and drop your comments on YouTube. Join us next time for more insights to boost your financial planning game.
See you now. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to the Finance Geeks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your comments on YouTube. Got questions? Send them our way. Follow us on social media and join us next time for more insights to boost your financial planning game.